This meeting of the Starkville Board of Alderman will now come to order. Please rise for the saying of the Pledge of Allegiance, to be followed by a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, you have before you a copy of the modified written agenda. Are there any proposed changes to the agenda as written? Alderman Dumas.
Under board business, report from Audit and Budget Committee, I'd like to place all three of those items on consent.
All right, Alderman Dumas has proposed revising the agenda to place item 10D in its entirety on the consent agenda, and that includes the approval of the appointment of Chief Administrative Officer Lynn Spruill as the chairperson of the Audit and Budget Committee, calling for a public hearing on the budget for fiscal year 2013 on September 4th, 2012 at the board meeting, and the approval of the engagement letter with Watkins, Ward, and Stafford for fiscal year 2012 as presented. Alderman Dumas, is that your proposed revision?
It is.
Do I hear any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Seeing none, those matters have been placed on the consent agenda. Alderman Dumas, do you have further proposed revisions?
I do. Under board business, item E, I'd like to place on consent.
All right. Proposed revision from Alderman Dumas is to place item E, approval of a special event request by Mississippi State University Athletic Department to have the research park declared a special event area for MSU home games as presented on the consent agenda. Before I ask for objection, I know the city attorney has a comment he'd like to make.
Two things I just wanted to make the board aware of. Normally when an entity is proceeding under the special events permit, it requires indemnity from that person or entity and insurance. And in this case, MSU has provided neither.
Any objection to Alderman Dumas's proposed revision? Any objection? Any objection?
Mr. Mayor, may I recognize? Mr. Turner, you asked us to get to include it. What's your recommendation to this?
I'm just letting you know that before you vote, so the board will have informed consent. The way that would play out is if liability arose from this arrangement, it's conceivable that Starkville could be a named defendant and would be defending alone and not have anybody indemnifying it or providing insurance for a claim or judgment.
Any objection? Alderman Corey.
Is this for the same reasons as was with the Bulldog Bash?
I haven't been contacted about why MSU isn't providing indemnification or insurance for this particular item.
Any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Seeing none, that matter's been placed on the consent agenda. Alderman Dumas, do you have further proposed revisions?
Under personnel, I'd like to add all 6 items to consent.
Alderman Dumas has proposed revising the agenda to place personnel items 1 through 6 on the consent agenda. Those are items 11I1 through items 11I6 on the agenda, and they are as follows. The authorization to advertise the filling of a vacant position of equipment operator in the new construction rehab division of public services as presented. The authorization to advertise to fill the vacant position of maintenance worker in the water sewer division of public services as presented. The authorization to advertise for promotions in the police department as presented. The authorization to hire a temporary employee to cover service needs in the position of cashier in the electric department due to medical leave of absence as presented. The authorization to hire an intern in the electric department to work with testing and maintenance as part of our metering program as presented. And changes in the personnel policy on donation of leave time as presented. Alderman Dumas, is that your proposed revision?
It is.
Do I hear an objection?
Mayor, only one I've got an objection to is number 6 to be in on consent.
All right, so the proposed revision would stand now as placing personnel items 1 through 5 on the consent agenda with item 6 remaining on the open agenda. Is there any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Seeing none, the only matter that will remain on the regular agenda for personnel is the discussion and consideration of changes in the personnel policy for donation of leave time. Alderman Dubus, you have further proposed
I
provisions.
do. Under Public Services, the new item number 3, I'd like to place on consent, draw attention to the finding of fact that's mentioned in there, and if the city attorney would like to add anything to that, he may, but with the finding of fact that's presented in the packet.
Proposed revision from Alderman Dumas to the agenda is to place item 11K3, the approval pursuant to Mississippi Code Section 31-7-1 and 31-7-13K, with a finding of fact that emergency conditions exist to justify Public Services Director to issue a notice to proceed to a qualified provider of sewer evaluation services to locate sources of inflow and infiltration that are causing sanitary sewer overflows on Carver Drive and Woodland Heights, and to notify the Starkville Board of Alderman of the selected provider, along with a schedule of rates, all to be spread on the minutes at the board's regular meeting on September 4th, 2012, as presented, along with the finding of fact as presented. Alderman Dumas, is that your proposed revision?
It is.
Any objection?
I have a question, not an objection, but when this came up, and I'm sorry, I don't see Mr. Devlin out there. When this came up 2 meetings ago or so, and we talked about going through the process of having these done, you named a few other areas that were also having problems. Is there a reason we're not also addressing those at the same time?
I'm not familiar with any other areas. When I asked for the approval to advertise for qualification.
Okay, I thought you had mentioned a couple of other neighborhoods, but I'll go back and check my notes too.
Yeah, check and let me know if I missed
Okay,
something.
all right, thank you.
Alderman Carver.
Again, I guess to really at that point, why were there were other issues? I know several on my ward that are having the same issue. Why were they, who drafted this? I mean, who put this on the agenda?
Mr. Devlin, with the assistance of Attorney Ladder.
Under why those streets and not any others?
Mr. Devlin?
Yeah, this is asking to circumvent the advertising and selection process for providers so we can get it started quicker.
Well, why were these two given priority over any others in the city? I mean, we've had
Because
3.
they're frequently reported to the DEQ,
Are there any others that are frequently reported, or?
random spots.
Okay.
I wouldn't certainly consider them emergency.
But you do have a plan for addressing those
Yeah,
as
I-
well
you know,
over time?
As they happen, we have equipment to handle those spot things, but these are kind of chronic and difficult. That DEQ is, telling us to expedite getting things.
Any objection? Any objection to placing the matter on the consent agenda? Any objection, any objection, any objection? Seeing none, that matter's been placed on the consent agenda. Alderman Dumas, do you have further proposed revisions?
I have no other.
Are there any further proposed revisions from the members of the board? Alderman Parker?
I'd like to put under departmental business, building codes and planning, consideration to approve P&Z FP 1202, a request by Jackson Construction for approval of Huntington Park subdivision Phase 8 on the consent agenda with conditions as presented by P&Z.
Alderman Parker's proposed revision is to place the approval of P&Z item FP 12-02 with conditions as recommended by P&Z and otherwise as presented on the consent agenda. Alderman Parker, is that your proposed revision?
It is.
Do I hear any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Seeing none, that matter's been placed on the consent agenda. Alderman Parker, do you have further proposed revisions?
Do not.
Are there any further proposed revisions from the members of the board? Any further proposed revisions to the agenda? Any further proposed revisions? Seeing none, a motion to approve the agenda as revised is in order.
So moved.
Motion has been made by Alderman Corey to approve the agenda as revised. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by Alderman Sistrunk. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Measure clearly passes. You now have before you the consideration of the approval of the consent agenda. Is there any objection to the consent agenda as revised? Any objection to the consent agenda as revised? Any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Seeing none, the consent agenda as revised is approved. And that will take us to announcements and comments by the mayor and members of the board. And I have a few tonight. The first, I'm actually going to pass the baton after saying a few congratulatory words. And that is, we're going to have a brief presentation by Chris Cosper, who has just completed the onerous process of getting our new electric department building LEED certified. And I have been told by numerous people in the architectural industry and other related fields that this is indeed a very difficult process that Mr. Cosper has just completed, and a distinction that we should be very proud of as a city. So thank you, Mr. Cosper, for all you've done for us, and now come and tell us about it.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, it's with some excitement that I learned earlier this month that the SED office building did receive LEED certification. So I'm going to talk briefly about that and what it may entail. So here, of course, is the building, and there's a picture of the official certification symbol. Some notes about this. The SED office building is the first LEED project in Starkville. There is a Pi Beta Phi house on campus that is LEED certified. But the SED office building is only one of 33 projects in the state to receive the certification. And as best as I can tell, it's the first municipal project to receive LEED certification. So what is the LEED rating system? Well, it's a product of the U.S. Green Building Council. And this is their blurb. And indeed, the U.S. Green Building Council is a diverse group of industry people, of environmentalists, and others who are concerned about green and sustainable construction. The LEED system has become the industry standard as a means of evaluating sustainable or green projects. And this is part of their advertisement, but it's true in fact. What was happening before the LEED system, people would say, well, I've designed a green or sustainable building, and the question was, well, prove it, or what do you mean? You know, what indeed makes it sustainable or green? Now, the LEED system is a point system based on 5 broad categories of features. So, as a point system, you'll want to see the points. And here are our points for the SED office building. Based on these broad categories. So we have sustainable sites, that, as the name suggests, has to do with the siting of the building. Water efficiency, energy and atmosphere, this is where the energy efficiency comes in. Materials and resources reflect such things as recycling and the recycling of building materials. Indoor environment, we have a lot of points here, and this has to do with the air quality in the building, the comfort of the occupants, lighting levels, access to daylight, and so forth. And then the 6th category is innovation, and we received 2 points there, for a total of 26 points on the LEED scale. So what were the exact categories? Here's just a sampling. It's the fact that we received points for heat island effect. Asphalt and dark roofs make cities hotter. Everybody knows this. If you've been in a large metropolitan area, it's significantly hotter than the surrounding countryside. Well, our building with its light roof and concrete paving reduces that. Water use reduction, so efficient toilets and faucets and so forth. Optimizing energy performance, it's an HVAC system that's 24% more efficient than standard or code required. Construction waste management, recycled materials, regional materials, that's products from local manufacturers. Outdoor air delivery monitoring, low emitting materials, so this is like low VOC paint. Anybody who was in the building during construction noticed that the building did not have that construction smell. That's good, because what you're smelling are a whole bunch of chemicals that are not good for you. Controllability of systems, this is giving the occupants relatively high levels of flexibility on comfort, heating and cooling. And then daylighting and views, which I think are very important. That's giving employees, for the most part, every office has a window to the outside. So what's the value of following this system? Well, I think it's 2 points. First, it shows the city of Starkville's commitment to its employees and others who use the facilities. You know, you think about the amount of time we spend indoors, you want good indoor air quality. And then secondly, it shows the city's commitment to enduring quality construction. You know, when you build a building like the SED office building, you hope that it's going to be there a while. I always had in mind sort of 50 years of performance. So, with that being said, that's where we are. We received the certification officially. Any questions?
Do we have any questions or comments from the members of the board? Alderman Dippers.
I'll just say that I really appreciate both your efforts. I know that, you know, the fact that this is quality of life and indoor quality, but having our Starkville Electric Department being a model of energy efficiency is something, especially as being one of the first municipal buildings in the state to do this, I think is definitely something to be proud of. So appreciate both y'all's efforts on that.
Thank you.
So there are different levels of lead?
Yes, there are. And the way I'll put this to you, to use a recent reference, we're on the podium, and we're glad to be there. If that makes sense. We're at the certified level. There's silver, gold, and platinum above that. There's some balancing you have to do as a design team. And I had some discussions earlier. You want to get legitimate points. You don't want to greenwash or do things to get points that don't necessarily fit the program and the owner. And I think we did a good job of balancing budget, the program, the owner's needs, and the green certification process.
Further questions or comments from the members of the board? Any further questions or comments from the members of the board? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And actually, an event that we thought was special enough to highlight with an independent press event this afternoon. The city just received a notification from the State Fire Rating Bureau that our fire rating has been upgraded to a Class 4 fire rating. Very significant accomplishment by our fire department. The last time the city's fire rating was upgraded was in the mid-1980s. And this will have an impact on commercial building owners' insurance rates. There may be a very modest impact for residential insurance rates, but commercial insurance rates could be expected to drop as much as 7 to 9% because of this. Chief Mann, would you like to say anything about the fire rating?
Well, Mayor, I think it's important to note that it was a long process, and again, we spoke earlier that we're going to look and start chasing the Class 3. It will indeed be a long process, but I think it's also important to recognize that the water department and building department played a huge role in that process also.
Well, Chief, all of you are to be commended. You've worked very, very well as a team, and this is a significant accomplishment that will serve our citizens very, very well. Thank you. Announcement for the board. We need to finish our final round of department head evaluations. We have 4 evaluations left to do. That's Chief Lindley, Chief Mann, Doug Devlin, and Edward Kemp. I need those in the office, your written evaluations, by August 31st, because that is Labor Day weekend that takes us into the next board meeting, and that will give Randy enough time to compile them so that they'll be ready for your consideration at the September 4th meeting. It is now my pleasure to introduce the newest members of the City of Starkville workforce, and we have a few tonight. First, I'd like to introduce LaDaniel Jordan. It is my pleasure to welcome LaDaniel Jordan as one of our new maintenance workers in the new construction rehab division of public services. LaDaniel is from Starkville and a graduate of Starkville High School. Before joining the city of Starkville, he was employed at Walmart and worked as a painting contractor. LaDaniel is the proud father of 3 sons. When he isn't busy taking care of them, he enjoys taking care of his dog, Halloween. Please join me in welcoming LaDaniel. I'd now like to welcome Ben Pennell. And Ben is another maintenance worker for new construction rehab in the Public Services Department. Ben is from Starkville and is a graduate of Starkville High School. He attended East Mississippi Community College and Mississippi State University, where he was a major in forest and wildlife management. Previously, Ben was the farm manager for Greenbrier Farms and cared for 4-H show animals, including cows, horses, and goats. Ben is the son of Joe and Cookie Pennell, and his family are members of First Baptist Church. He enjoys spending time with his girlfriend Emily Parsons, and in his spare time he enjoys bass fishing, bow hunting, and caring for his 2 Labrador retrievers, Dean and Bo. Please join me in welcoming Ben Pennell. I'd now like to welcome LaToya Brown. And LaToya Brown is our new service writer for the auto maintenance shop. LaToya is from Starkville and a graduate of Alexander High School. LaToya attended East Mississippi Community College, where she received her degree in automotive technology as well as an electrical technology certificate. Before joining the city of Starkville, LaToya was an RV technician for Johnny Bishop RV and worked for Butler Fleet International in Memphis as a mechanic's helper and a parts attendant. LaToya is the daughter of Ramona Ross and Halbert Johnson. She is also the proud mother of 1 son, Mikkel. LaToya and her family attend 16th Section Baptist Church in Starkville. In her spare time, LaToya enjoys fishing and football, especially the Armstrong Yellow Jackets, Mississippi State Bulldogs, and the New England Patriots, and taking care of her 2 pinchers, Ike and Tina. Please welcome and join me in welcoming LaToya. I'd now like to welcome Courtney Goodson, new Deputy Court Clerk for the Municipal Court. Courtney joins us as our new Deputy Court Clerk. Courtney is originally from Calhoun City and is a graduate of Calhoun City High School. She attended Mississippi University for Women in Columbus, where she graduated with honors with a Bachelor of Science in Legal Studies. Before joining the city of Starkville, Courtney worked as a pharmacy technician at the Walmart Pharmacy. Courtney enjoys spending time shopping, reading John Grisham novels, taking care of her Chihuahua, Toby, and spending time with her husband, Blake. Courtney and her husband are currently visiting churches in Starkville, but they have previously attended Fellowship Baptist Church. An interesting note about Courtney is she is part of a Native American tribe. She is part Native American, and her tribe is the Blackfeet tribe. Please join me in welcoming Courtney. And finally, I'd like to introduce Mike St. Louis. Mike is our new electrical inspector for the Building Codes and Planning Department. Mike is originally from Sarasota, Florida. He is a graduate of Riverview High School in Sarasota. Before joining the city of Starkville, Mike was the building official for the city of West Point, as well as owning his own business as a plumbing contractor. Mike and his wife Debbie are the proud parents of 3 girls and the grandparents of 7 grandchildren. Mike's hobbies include astronomy, photography, and American history, particularly the Civil War. He enjoys fishing and traveling when time permits. Mike and his family attend First Baptist Church in West Point, where he is the sound man. Please join me in welcoming Mike St. Louis. And that concludes my announcements for this evening. Do we have any announcements and comments from the members of the board? Any announcements and comments from the members of the board?
Mayor, I just want to highlight something that went on the consent agenda, and that is that we have that public hearing on the budget. I want to be very clear that there's the public hearing on the budget, the first meeting in September. Draft copies of the budget will be online after tonight, perhaps, if anyone's interested in looking at that before the public hearing.
Any further announcements and comments from the members of the board? Any further announcements from the members of the board? Seeing none, we'll move to citizen comments. At this time, any citizen wishing to make comments this evening may do so by coming forward, introducing yourself, and you'll be recognized to speak for a maximum of 3 minutes.
Good evening to the mayor and board. My name is Alvin Thomas, Ward 7. We would like to recognize the Vice Mayor Trump in Alderman.
Thank you, Alvin.
Mr. Turner?
Citizens are kind of warm about some issues, and they would like to make a change. Citizens would like for the city clerk office to go back to being the city clerk office, or not the director of finance, or let it be the city clerk office, or don't take away our health. The Carver Drive ditch, the NACP and concerned citizens, we would like to see that ditch covered by the end of the year. Enough is enough. You wouldn't want to be treated like those people treated. And don't treat them like you wouldn't want to be treated. And those are concerns that have people very warm.
Thank you, Mr. Turner. We have further citizen comments.
Mr. Mayor, my name is Douglas McClellan. I own property in Starkville located at 1904 Patton Drive. Legal description of that property would be lots 18 and 19 Westwood subdivision. My wife and I purchased that property in October of 1987 as an investment property, and it was primarily used as a rental property. It's a nice little home, 3-bedroom, 1 bath. That property butts up and is adjacent to Whitfield. This particular residence, at the back of it, is where the alternate school, the metal building for the alternate school, was located. And I left a letter with the board outlining my concerns. It was dated August the 20th, and I'd like to read that letter back, and it will briefly explain why I'm here this evening. At the recent meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission, a proposal was passed to allow the metal building located on Whitfield, formerly the alternative school, to be used as a new church facility, namely the Tribe of Judah. The proposal, however, was conditional upon the new church being able to provide additional parking at the rear of the building. This green area at the rear of the building is of concern to me when it is developed into a possible parking area. Typically in the past, what has happened, individuals, namely students, have used this green area or grass area as a cut-through or a shortcut between Whitfield and Patton Drive to gain access to Green Oak subdivision. If this area is now to be cleared and used as a parking area, I'm somewhat fearful this will only encourage more individuals to begin doing the same practice, unless some type of barricade is erected, i.e. some type of fencing. Therefore, in order to protect the integrity and privacy of my property, as well as to deter individuals from using both properties to gain access to Green Oak subdivision, I would respectfully request a motion be passed that a wooden fence be erected by the Tribe of Judah before a certificate of occupancy is issued. I've discussed this matter with Alderman Carver, and we attempted to meet together to look at the property. Unfortunately, we're not. But this is why I'm before the board at this time. Mr. Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. McClellan. Do we have any further citizen comments? Yes, ma'am.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. I live over on Gerard Road, it's called Gary Road. And these kids that's going to school over there, they don't have nowhere to stand and sit the bus. And they go be going through there in the morning, all day long, speeding just like they on the speed, track. And we need some bumpers, speed bumpers over there.
Yes.
I'm right across the street, just between Montgomery and 389. which is Garrett Road, they call it Garrard. But you're Garrett or Gerard. The kids stand out there in the front. They don't have no sign out there stating that it's a bus stop. And there's a lot of kids, be going there. They be shooting through there just like they running on the speedway.
So is your request for something that would serve as a bus stop for the kids in between Montgomery and
Correct.
Jackson on Garrett?
And ever since they opened up on West Front Road, coming through there, they need a light there.
Okay.
And the kids do need protection.
Okay. I'll have the city engineer take a look at it, and we'll see what we can
I'm
do.
asking for speed bumps. Just like they driving on.
Oh, and we need your name for the record.
Iona Smith.
Thank you, Ms. Smith.
My name is Christopher Outlaw, and I'm just here on behalf of the Outlaw family. I wanted to invite the members of the board and members of the community out to Travis Outlaw Day, which will be held August 25th. That's this Saturday from 10 to 3.
And I want to echo that invitation. That Miss Outlaw has been gracious enough to let me judge the ribs again this year. I'm sorry, all of you will not be able to judge the ribs, but I will tell you, I've attended this event every year for the last 3 years, and it is certainly worth attending and a wonderful way to spend a Saturday. Thank y'all for being here tonight.
She also wanted me to tell y'all she didn't attend tonight because she was afraid y'all was going to make her work or something.
I like that. I like that.
I'm Daisy McDowell from Carver Drive, where we're trying to do the best we can, but we cannot put covenant in that ditch. And it's not getting any smaller. The more it rains, the bigger it gets. We are asking for that ditch because it's more kids down there than it used to be. And mine, I leave them where they are. Please, cover Carver Drive ditch. Please. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McDowell. Further citizen comments?
All right, sit down.
Sure.
I'm Alan Burnham from Ward 2. I've got a brief statement that actually I'm going to read so that I don't wander off the track. In a few minutes under board business, you will hear an appeal of the denial of Ceasefire's request for 2 variances to Article 3, Section 10455B8 of the City of Starkville's Code of Ordinances. I'm making my remarks in this, the Citizens' Comments agenda item, because there is not a public hearing on this issue and I was denied a public appearance. I'm not here to discuss the merits of either side of the issue, as the ball is definitely in your court. You as a body will make a decision based on what factors you deem important, because the ordinance gives you the power to waive or reduce the factors considering and granting a permit. My feelings on the subject of a permit for the location of this tower are already known. What I want to do tonight is to bring to your attention some of the inadequacies of the ordinance itself. As it stands, this ordinance is not a clear-cut statement of regulations governing the placement of antennas and towers within the city. Rather, it is a document that leaves one wondering what is permitted, what requires a special permit, and how to come to a workable and acceptable solution to the question of tower location. The biggest problem with the ordinance, as I see it, is within Sections 10454, district regulations, and Section 10455, towers, performance standards, and other requirements. Section 10454A, permitted uses, on the one hand, allows the placement of towers 150 feet or less in height within 300 feet or less of residential property. But on the other hand, says permitted uses shall comply with all subsections of Section 10455 and Section 10455B8 states all towers erected within the city must conform to the applicable performance standards in Section 10455. Part B8 of which says antennas and towers shall be subject to the following restrictions. Quote, no tower shall be set within a 2,640-foot radius of another tower or residential zoning district. So which is it? 300 feet or less, or 2,640 feet? In my eyes, Sections 10454A1 and Sections 10455 render Sections 10454A2 null and void. These sections of the ordinance are the heart of the ordinance. This section is most likely affecting all future tower applications, and they are unworkable. They neither help the applicant nor serve the city. I must also ask, does the city make a distinction between the residential property of section 10454A2A and the residential zoning district of section 1045B8D? In addition, the current ordinance as written contains out-of-date information such as towers being permitted in zoning district C2, A1, and M1, when in fact they are permitted only in M1, with C2 and A1 being conditional. This in itself is a small matter brought about by the new permitted and conditional use chart adopted by the city, but it renders what is contained in the ordinance out of date and can mislead the reader. On another issue with regard to fencing, section 10455B6 is not supported by section 10455G. I was recently told by a city official that there is no perfect ordinance, and this ordinance is far from perfect. Currently, the ordinance on wireless communication towers was last reviewed in 2001. Accepting that, I ask that you make every effort to see that this ordinance is reviewed in a timely manner, considering the growth of Starkville, its residential areas, and changes in wireless technology. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Byrne.
Mr. Mayor, may I be recognized?
You may.
Mr. Mayor, I think it's appropriate to ask Ms. Sproul a question. I think she needs to have an opportunity to respond to the allegation. There was an allegation made that he was denied a public hearing, and I'm sure you followed the policy. And just tell the public what the policy is on public appearances.
The policy by the board that was passed during this administration was that there would be a maximum of 2 public appearances, and prior to Mr. Burnham's request, we already had 2 public appearances that were scheduled.
May I ask, have we had exceptions to that policy during
When a
this
board member specifically requests that, then yes, we have that, we make those exceptions, but it's at a board member's request.
Right, and Mr. Burnham and I did talk, and we talked about that being an option, but I just wanted to let it be noted that there are times when those exceptions are made.
Further citizen comments?
Yes, well, my name is John Wade. I'm an attorney with Bernini, Radford, Brower, and Hughes, and I'm here representing C-Spire. And
Mr. Wade, are you going to speak on the substance of the?
I'm not.
Okay.
I was going to respond to Mr. Burnham's comments about the ordinance itself, and in particular, that there's one provision that requires a tower to be set back a half a mile from a residentially zoned area. It's my understanding it was adopted in 1991, and in my experience, that is highly unusual and very restrictive to the point where, if enforced literally, Starkville is almost zoning cell towers out of the city, which is clearly unlawful under the Telecommunications Act, which states that a municipality should not prohibit or have the effect of prohibiting the provision of wireless services, and local zoning decisions or ordinances that prevent the closing of significant gaps in the availability of wireless services violate the statute. So just in terms of that statute itself, I would agree that that provision needs to be looked at, because I've never run across anything that requires you to be that far away from a residentially zoned district. And when you look at Starkville's zoning map in a whole, I mean, that leaves very few places to put cell towers.
Thank you, Mr. Wade. Further citizen comments? Do we have any further citizen comments this evening? Any further citizen comments? Seeing none, we'll move to public appearances, and we have 2 public appearances scheduled this evening. The first is the first public appearance before this board of Dr. Lewis Holloway, and he's making the annual presentation on the budget, but he has asked for an opportunity to make a little bit more than just a routine budgetary presentation. And I will tell you that I had the pleasure of attending the annual school year beginning convocation, and got to see Dr. Holloway's presentation there, and was most impressed with his vision for our school district. So, Dr. Holloway, I look forward to hearing you again tonight. You'll have a maximum of 10 minutes, and then at the conclusion of your presentation, I'll ask that you hear any questions or comments that the board members may have.
I'm already in trouble if I only have 10 minutes. It's good to be here tonight. I don't know whether to stand or sit, but we have Dr. Keith Coble with the school board here as chairman, as well as Jenny Turner. And we also have my new assistant superintendent, Dr. Toriano Holloway. and our finance director, Rob Logan. It's good to be here. It's good to have school operational. Our first days of school have went fairly smoothly, except for some traffic issues and some bus stack-up issues that we're currently trying to make better for the city. And I also want to say, we want to work with you. Mayor Wiseman had sent us a letter about the possibility of us changing our date of the board meetings, so there is no conflict, and we are working toward that, making that change. Hopefully it'll begin in January. The problem was not our reluctance to make this change, but it was reluctance of people that already had schedules out that they couldn't change. So we do want to work with you in that. Our enrollment is up to 4,354 students. That's 251 students more than we had last year, or a 5% increase, and that's pretty significant for the school district. I just want to show these brief goals, and we need to revise our goals. We know that. We need to develop this year a strategic plan for finance, for facilities, as well as for technology. And the first one would be a high-performing school district by 2012, which means 65% of all students will score proficient or above. Has just about been done away with the changes in the waiver of the AYP and the No Child Left Behind. That law was impossible to think that every student would be proficient by the year 2014. And it has changed, and there are some changes to it that will make us easier to attend that. But that goal will change. The other two, increasing the graduation rate to 75%, we believe is more than achievable, as well as the 60% of students engaged in some, in one or more non-core areas such as visual, performing arts, and athletics. This district has the largest number of students I've ever seen participating in sports, participating in drama, participating in art, and they're doing a great job. These, of course, are our board members, and you know them. Keith Coble is the president, but the other four you selected for the school district. And as far as our relationship in the future goes, it's very important that you send us quality board members, and we hope that that will continue. This is a projection growth of how our enrollment is growing, and let me say this, that 251 students that we have assimilated into the school district, we've accommodated without adding any more teachers. We have excellent teacher-pupil ratios throughout the school district, and actually I was quite surprised with that. So we're blessed by that fact. At this point, I'll let our finance director, Mr. Rob Logan, talk about some budget items.
Here we have our ad valorem slide, and as you can see, we went up a little bit from last year, and only because of the increase of the bond payments. You can see that why there were significant changes at different points in this time frame. Have a breakdown of the millage and how that is going to be broken out for the 2012-13 year. To point out a couple of those things is operational mills. We have in the school district a 55 mill max. We are currently at 50.94. And another area that we will be looking at in the future is the limited tax notes, and that can be up to 3 mills. We're at 0.12. Those have to be paid back over a 10-year period. But we have some room there, and we will be looking at that in the future. Here is budget comparisons for 12 and 13, and broken out by function.
I'd like to say, cut in, Ron, just a second, that in the last 4 years, we've lost $9 million in funding from the state. And of course, we anticipate that that will continue, but that's a significant revenue loss in the last 4 years. And here, just a breakdown of how we are funded. And you can see the state and local, that is the majority of our income. So we're looking around 84%. Our expenditures, and this is by function. Instruction is about half of our budget. Support services, which includes a lot of items that go back to the school, is at 32%. That makes up a large portion of our budget is the school site itself. And this is a breakdown by object code, which is areas underneath the functions and salaries and benefits. The majority of our budget is made up of teachers and
employees, and 71% of that goes to that area. And here are a few highlights that we implemented this year, are in the process of doing so. We've had language arts, which is the reading streets at the top, 200,000. Singapore math, that's another item for education for third grade, and that's 28. Now buses, we're replacing 10 for a total of 789,000. Smart boards are going more into the classroom, and every regular classroom now has a smart board, and 2 computer labs. So now there'll also be a lot more computers going in this year, but we've already put in these 2 labs.
Thanks, Rob. We're also looking at a lease purchase for buying, leasing laptop computers for each of our teachers over a 3-year term. And that we need a stabilized technological platform for all teachers. But if it's a laptop format, if something goes wrong with that laptop, in the 3-year lease, the warranty is covering it for 3 years. So if we have 20 extra computers, a teacher's computer goes down, we unplug it, give them another laptop, take that one, and have it fixed under warranty. So it eliminates any teachers being down from computers. I actually was going to talk about this tonight, but I think I'm going to run way over my time, so I'll hold that for another time. We've been analyzing our facilities, and there's a lot of facility needs in the district. We've got 3 major roofs we need to do. There's a huge issue with our HVAC systems that needs to be upgraded. We have 96 3-ton air conditioning units throughout the district that are over 26 years old. We have 3 boilers that are over 50 years old. And I think you can see that those are big issues, and we have plans to address that. But at some point in time, we're going to need to look at how can we finance something long-term to address those items. We also have an energy management system that has not been monitored and not been in use for the past several years. And that's an error on the school district that we're trying to get back up so that by computer, we can monitor all the electricity, the air conditioning and the heating throughout the school district. That being, if the classrooms were 72 during the day, it would have a 78 night setback for the night, and it would kick on the next morning before school and be back to 72. And we think that there's significant savings there. We're also working very hard with our staffing to make sure that we're not only economical, but that we're functioning as well as we can and getting the most bang for the dollar out of our employees, which is basically the school district. I mean, somewhat 80% of our district is made up of employees, and that's our biggest expenditure. And we're finding ways to become more efficient and also serve our students better. I want to close, and we do have a big change in assessments coming, but I just can't do it in that length of time. So to honor your time, we'll save that for another day. But it's dependent that our economic development is dependent upon the quality of your public school system, and that we all need to work together to make sure that we do have a quality school system. And I think that there's things that we can do to make it better. We can certainly be more user-friendly and consumer-friendly to the constituents that use our public school system. And we have strong areas in the school district. We're strong in math and science. We're strong in the arts. We're strong in drama. We're strong in music. We're strong in athletics. We're strong in the gifted program. There are a lot of points of pride of our school district that we need to let the community know. And I want you to know that we're going to do our part. And when it comes to economic development and we have an opportunity to make an impact on someone that's considering Starkville, we will do our part to make sure that our public schools are known and what our strengths are for them. So with that, I'd just like to close. I thank you for your time. I thank you for the time when you met with me last February, and we want to work with you in making this a better community.
Thank you, Dr. Holloway.
Dr. Cook, keep sending us Jenny Turners.
At this time, do we have an Alderman Perkins?
Dr. Holloway, good evening again, and thank you very much for your presentation. Everything you said is very important. Just want to highlight one thing that you mentioned at the onset of your presentation. There has been strong interest from citizens in this community, and to my recollection, it has been expressed by the members of this board, and as well as the mayor, about your changing your first meeting. And I know you indicated that there are some board members who need to look at their schedules to see can they coordinate that. And the citizens who have repeatedly come before us have expressed grave concern about their strong desire to attend both the meetings of this mayor board and of the school board. And with regard to your comments, I know that you mentioned that it may be considered, but and I understand how it works. It's not done until the roll call is taken. So I just want to respectfully request on behalf of the constituents who have been coming before this board, and that's been the driving force to get your board to change. So I would like for you and your board to get that change done as soon as you can, if possible. And I think that'll be in the overall best interest of the community in light of the different concerns about the different ones who want to attend both meetings. And that'll be good for government, because that'll be a good community participation and may build a strong support for the district. So if you would just, if you don't mind, just inform City Hall so they can let us know about your decision. We trust and hope that you and your board will take that matter up as soon as possible. And if you just inform the mayor and Ms. Brewer or either one of them about your decision. When do you think that may come up again with your board?
It's going to be on the board agenda for September 4th, and it's my personal belief that it will take effect at the first meeting in January.
Right. So, well, again, after that meeting, would you be so kind to notify the mayor or Ms. Brewer or your staff of that decision? Yes. Thank you, Mr. Superintendent. We appreciate what you're doing. Yes, sir.
Alderman Dennis.
Well, welcome to the board meeting. With 4 children in your school district and the teacher who teaches, our wife who teaches there, I'm obviously very supportive of our school district, but I'm very encouraged to hear you talk about economic development because of how vitally important that is for that entire endeavor. And so very encouraged to hear you say that, as you did in February, and as I'm sure we'll hear you say continually through time. So kudos for that. Have you considered performance contracts on the energy efficiency projects that you're talking about?
We have, and actually have been under the performance contract. The district didn't take full advantage of it, and we're trying to get that back. But we've purchased this system, and I don't know that getting into another performance contract is going to avail us because we own the system. It's just a matter of getting it up, getting it going, and getting our personnel trained that they can operate the system. And the issue is you can't have a meeting at an auditorium and the air conditioner not come on. That makes everybody mad. So it has to be planned. It has to have a technician there that understands the system to make it work. And I'm sure the same issues of City Starkville.
Thank you again.
Further, Alderman Carter.
I've got a couple questions. First of all, thank you for coming to Starkville, and I've been highly impressed with meeting you and the things you're doing. So this is about 3 questions, and I'll lead into each one of them. One was a 60% graduation rate. Is that seems to me extremely low? How does that relate to the state and national average? Is it average or what are some ways we can address that?
I'll let you ask your questions. I'm sorry.
No, just saying, what are some ways you think we can address that over the
I
next
think we're already doing that. I mean, personally, and I had this conversation with the board about 6 weeks ago, I personally think the 75% is low. I think we can do much better than that. And we are doing things to, just block scheduling alone and allowing students to earn 32 credits in a 4-year period. And the issue is, too, about students dropping out is, we can kind of hold them along through the 8th grade, but when they get to 9th grade, they've got to earn Carnegie units.
Yes.
And when they are unsuccessful in earning those Carnegie units, and they get behind, and they see, I'm not going to be able to graduate with my class, then they start thinking about other options. And the block scheduling allows us to recap that. We also have a program for course recovery that operates every period. So a student could recover a course and not have to take the entire course all over again, because it would give him a test and give him credit for the algebra that he or she already knows. So those 2 items are huge in terms of keeping school. And then the third part of that is the amount of school activities and engagement of our students in school activities gets the hook that school is interesting.
I get you.
And I would want to say that instead of 60%, it's got to be 70, 80 when I look at the participation of band and football and drama and art and things, that these kids are really engaged, and in my mind, they're at the top of their game. I mean, so I'm very pleased with that section. I'm sorry, that was a long answer.
Oh, perfect.
But that's not on my 10 minutes.
I know. One more. You spoke about the personnel being over about 80 or 81% of the expenditures out on the school district. And then you spoke about the student-teacher. What is the student-teacher ratio?
In elementary, it's roughly 21-1. And keep in mind, too, that because we're associated with Mississippi State, we have hundreds of student teachers, interns, and practicum students circling through our schools. And they're an asset for us as well in terms of getting instruction done.
So you spoke about the efficiencies and being more efficient with the budget, but that wouldn't. We don't have any long-term plans to decrease the student-teacher ratio.
Right. Well, that's a really good question. First of all, from the resources that we've uncovered, I don't believe that we will have a tax increase next year. The only cloud of a tax increase goes back to the issue of the facilities. And there's a thing called a 3-mill levy that we may have to do to take care of some of those building things. And if we do that, my pledge to the community, the school board, is that you will clearly know what you're buying and what we're going to do to take care of these facility issues.
Okay.
So that's that part of it. Now, as these recessions continue on, the only way that we have to generate revenue inside the school district is to ease our teacher-pupil ratios up. I mean, it's the only choice that we have. I think the board is committed to keeping those as low as we can, but that's the only relief valve we have, because we're right up against the cap of where we can legally, tax on that law.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions or comments from the members of the board?
I've got one more. Where did you see, when you talked about the 251, where did we experience the largest percentage of growth? Kindergarten.
I'd say we're up 35 students. I think it's 385. We've been seeing about 350.
Do we see any growth in the other?
We see growth all throughout the district, yes, sir.
That's good.
Alderman Vaughn.
Good evening, Dr. Holloway. Welcome to Starkville. My question about Dumas, about the X part of it. What's the average count of student per head in each classroom?
I'm sorry, what?
The average count per student per head in each classroom, what's the average? 21? Okay, and did you say we went up 251 students? What they're gonna do with our rating in football, 5A or 6A?
That's a great question. Great
It just
question.
depends on how the other school districts go. They'll line us up and take the top 32, and then hopefully we'll, that 9 through 12, we'll stay in the second 32. So hopefully we'll stay 5A where we are.
Thank you.
Which, another congratulations that we just won the All Sports Award for the state of Mississippi in Class 5A, so great accomplishment.
That's attributed to Stan Miller and the high school staff and the great students.
Further questions or comments? Any further questions or comments from the members of the board? Any further questions or comments?
Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Dr. Holloway.
You asked the most important question.
Our second and final public
You asked the
appearance
most
this
important
evening
question.
is by Jimmy Moore from Waste Pro.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I may approach.
You may.
I have.
Friday night, it doesn't matter if it's 2 or 3.
And for the first time in a long time, I guessed correctly, I brought 10. Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. I'm not here to ask for anything, I'm not here to say anything, I'm here to familiarize you with who Waste Pro is. With me this evening is Philip Crosley. He is the division manager for our Columbus operation, which many of you may know as Mississippi Industrial Waste Disposal. That was the name of that company in the past. Waste Pro purchased Mississippi Industrial Waste latter part of 2011. I've been remiss in my duty to come before you and share this with you. Waste Pro is not a household word in some places yet. But it is our opinion that it will be throughout the state a household word very soon. A little bit of the history about it. I worked for a company in Meridian. I did for 11 years, Southern Waste Disposal Incorporated. Waste Pro purchased Delta Sanitation on the Mississippi Gulf Coast in January of 2010. April of 2010, Southern Waste Disposal was purchased. Since April of 2010, we've opened operating locations in Hattiesburg, Jackson, Natchez, Columbus, and Southaven, most recently. As I said, the growth has been unbelievable. It's growth through acquisition, and what Waste Pro has done is buy those companies who are committed to customer service. They don't buy everybody. They talk to the current ownership, see what their commitments are, what their core values are, and if they fit their needs, we purchase them. I mentioned to one of you outside before the meeting started, we've got contracts as small as 168 people. We have contracts as large, or will have. In October 1, we start collection of the largest solid waste contract in the state of Mississippi, Harrison County. 68,000 residents. It's the entire unincorporated area and every municipality within Harrison County. That will involve garbage collection, recycling, and bulky waste collection. And we only have to do that by the trucks, by the carts, get them out, get ready, paint the trucks, hire the people by October 1. So we have a kind of tight time frame for that. I can talk about many things about Waste Pro. I can go over what's in the packet that I gave you. That's just a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Company brochure, letters of recommendation, which are to me the most important part of that packet. What I tell you is not nearly as important as what people say about Waste Pro. But I encourage you, if you ever have a need or need us to do anything, give us a call. We stand ready to do that. The company motto, which is reflected on the front of that packet, is caring for our communities. I stand before you tonight and say we do an outstanding job for that, in my opinion. We don't approach any contract as a carte blanche approach, but we do a lot of things to help the communities where we have a presence. As I said, Philip's with me. He may have something that he would like to add. My wife would be proud of me because I'm brief. She tells me constantly, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth. Don't talk so much. Philip, is there anything you want to add?
No, you've got it.
The service that hopefully some of you heard about from Mississippi Industrial Waste in the past will not go away. The same people are there. It's just a different name. One thing I did not mention, and I need to, I should have a real initiative. Waste Pro is a corporation, but it's a privately held corporation. We're not traded on Wall Street. That does have some advantage. There is 2 other things that I should have mentioned. Starkville, I told myself sitting there, I was going to say 2 things. First, the reason I stand up is not to elevate myself, but my office is sitting outside. It's a Ford pickup. I've been riding all day. I'll be riding all day tomorrow and have an hour and a half to go home tonight. So I enjoy standing. I sit enough. And the second thing, I'm not from Starkville, but I will offer my services to Mayor Wiseman if he needs an assistant real tester. that really sounds great. But I appreciate the opportunity to come before you tonight. If you have any questions, I'll answer them now. If not, you can contact Philip at any time at Mississippi Industrial Waste, and you can contact me. My card's in there. Usually you can find me via cell phone because I'm hardly ever in my office anymore. But I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Do we have any questions or comments from the members of the board? Any questions or comments? Seeing none. Thank you, Mr. Moore.
Thank you.
And that's going to carry us to board business. The first 2 matters of board business tonight are matters that I'm going to have to recuse myself from. Presentations will be made by Johnny Wade, who is an attorney at Bernini, Grantham, Brower, and Hughes. My wife is also an attorney at Bernini, Grantham, Brower, and Hughes. So because of the conflict of interest, I'll be recusing myself. With that said, without objection, I'm going to move us to a brief recess. Y'all can choose to use that just to allow Alderman Sistrunk to assume the gavel, or y'all can take a little bit longer and Alderman Sistrunk will reconvene the meeting. Without objection, we'll move into brief recess. Any objection? Any objection? Objection, seeing none. Stand in recess.
Let's take a short break, a very short break, 3 minutes. The meeting will come back to order, please. The next item of business is the consideration of an appeal by Attorney John E. Wade, Jr. on behalf of Cellular South Real Estate of the denial of C Spire's request for 2 variances related to Article 3, Section 104-55B8 of the City of Starkville's Code of Ordinances for a 60-foot setback in lieu of the 100-foot setback requirement, and a 60-foot setback in lieu of the 2,640-foot radius requirement from a residentially zoned district for a proposed communications tower located in a C2 zoning district at 403 Abernathy Drive in Ward 1. Mr. Wade? Ben?
Ms. Sistrunk, I'll do a brief introduction. Basically read the first part, so I'll just skip down. The subject property consists of 1.51 acres of land and is located in the Stark Crossing subdivision east of the Highway 25 bypass. The proposed communication tower will be a 100-foot monopole design enclosed within a 60 by 60-foot compound accessed by a 12-foot wide driveway from Abernathy Drive. C Spire will operate the unmanned facility in compliance with FCC licensed spectrum, which will eliminate any possibility of interference with the antennas of other systems. The structure does not exceed obstruction standards and will not be a hazard to air navigation per the FAA and Starkville-Ottawa County Airport Authority letters. Planning staff provided 5 conditions to consider if the request were to be recommended for approval. The public hearing was held on July 25th and no public opposition to the request was received. The Board of Adjustment and Appeals voted 3-1 to deny the variances requested, and a copy of the draft meeting minutes has been provided in your packets. Mr. Wade has appealed the denial on behalf of his client, which has been included in your packet this evening as well. I will be happy to answer any questions the Alderman may have at this time, and would add that Mr. Wade is present this evening and would also like to address the Mayor and Board.
Let's hear from Mr. Wade.
Yes, ma'am.
First.
I introduced myself previously. I'm John Wade, an attorney with Renee Brown Hughes, representing C Spire. We've also got some other representatives here, Mr. David McGee and Laurel Mitchell and Bob Pierce. Bob's an engineer, and he's going to be better able to handle the technical questions. First of all, we do appreciate your time. I know y'all got a full agenda tonight. We appreciate the consideration. And, C Spire's got a long-standing business relationship with the City of Starkville and Mississippi State, and look forward to continuing that. I would like to pass out copies of this search ring. It's in your packet, but instead of y'all having to flip through it, it works for you. What I'm handing you, and we'll explain it in more detail momentarily, is the zoning map with the search ring that the C Spire engineers have come up with that shows our need for improved cell coverage within this ring. What I'd like to do is just go over briefly the background of our application. I'm going to turn it over to David McGee, who's primarily responsible for locating this site, and then Bob Pierce, the engineer, who can address the technical aspects of this better than I can. What happens last year, Sailor South Real Estate filed an application for a 130-foot tower on C2 property west of Highway 25. It's right by that Pond Lake Church, and it's on this edge of the search ring right here. This is a ring that our engineers have put together and said, this is the problem area. We've got to have a tower within this search ring to satisfy our objectives and improve the coverage. We went in front of the Planning Commission in December of 2011. An issue came up as to whether or not this was a permitted use or a special use under y'all's older ordinance, and it was ultimately determined that it was a permitted use, but we needed a variance. At the other side, the issue was RMR Development, who apparently owns a lot of property in Starkville and has done a lot of projects here, owns this property right here, this commercial property adjacent to the church, and they opposed that application. The city then requested that C-Spire work with RMR to come up with an alternative location that would be acceptable to both C-Spire and RMR, since there was no other opposition. What we did, not me personally, but C-Spire worked with RMR over the next few months, and they found another location on the other side of Highway 25, down in this corner on C2 property, and it's owned by Campbell Street Development, which is an affiliate of RMR, and they were all on board with this. The original location was going to be, over here is going to be a 130-foot tower. We dropped the height to 100 feet. There's a crown tower up in this area, the northwest side, that's about 180 feet. There's some light poles up here close to the bypass. I think they're about 130 feet. So the proposed tower is just 100-foot monopole with no guy wires. Looks similar to a light pole. We went in front of the Planning Commission on July 10th. Once again, there's no opposition there. Representatives from RMR were there expressing support, and that body recommended approval of the conditional use. We went back to the Board of Adjustment on July 25, requesting two variances. One is you got a variance that states you have to be within the height of the tower from a property line. This is a proposed 100-foot tower, so we were seeking a variance for 60 feet. And then you have the other ordinance, the one that I mentioned earlier that I think is problematic from a legal standpoint, that requires you to be 2,640 feet away from residentially zoned areas, which makes it almost impossible in this situation to satisfy that criteria, because you've got R4 all along here, you've got residential here. Even under our old site, it wasn't going to satisfy that criteria because it's approximately a quarter of a mile from Highway 25 to here, this residential property here, and from this end of the search ring, it's still, I think it might be about a quarter of a mile. It's still not a half mile away. We went in front of the Board of Adjustments. Only 4 members were able to be there. They voted 3-1 to recommend denial of the variance. Once again, at that meeting, we had representatives of RMR and of Campbell Street Development were there expressing support for this location, and there was no other opposition. So we are now here on the appealing the Board of Adjustments recommendation to deny the variance, and we're also here on the Planning Commission's recommendation with certain conditions to approve our request for conditional use. I will say that the proof in front of those bodies was uncontroverted that C-Spire has a gap in service here that they need to fill in order to satisfy their FCC requirements, and it needs to be within that search ring, and there's simply nothing within the search ring that would satisfy that criteria. We dropped the height from 130 to 100 feet. It's going to be shorter than these light poles along Highway 25. It's a lot shorter than the Crown Tower at 180 feet. And we basically did what the city asked us to do. We were here last year and they said, go work it out with RMR. We spent months, we worked it out with RMR. Nobody's objected to it. And so we're going to request that the Board of Alderman consider approving our request for the variances and the conditional use. I'll be glad to entertain questions, but I'm going to turn it over to Dave McGee, who can get into more details about what went into the site location, and Bob Pierce to answer engineering questions, because I'm certainly not capable of doing that. Does anybody have any questions of me?
Unless somebody has a question now, we'll do that when y'all have finished your presentation.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name's David McGee, and I'm with a company called CMI Acquisitions, and we do work for C Spire, Salem South Real Estate. I filed the application for this site, and it worked with Mr. Griffith and Assistant Planner Pamela Daniel. Been real good to work with. If I might approach, I apologize, I don't have multiple copies, but this is a kind of a bird's-eye picture of a 100-foot monopole tower that's similar to what we're proposing that might give you a good idea. Okay. Mr. Carver saw it earlier. Excuse me. I first started work on this site, and we found the location that Mr. Wade talked about on the west side of Highway 25. That's kind of was behind Pine Lake Church, that was proposed at 130 feet. You know, he mentioned that we ran into the opposition from the developer, and so we wanted to, you know, comply with the city's request to work with them. And we did so, and they gave us this location that we're currently working on. So this site that we're proposing, as I said, is 100 feet, which is really short for a wireless tower. It's shorter than some trees, shorter than the light poles he mentioned on Highway 25 towards the bypass, which are 130 feet. This location has some unique features that should be considered. We think behind the site there's a kind of an embankment with a tree line that will help with the view shed of the site. The 100-foot height, the monopole design. This, as he said, this location is in a C2 zone, and we have had no opposition, to date on this site from any adjacent landowners. He went over the need for this site. We just like to engineer can get into that, but even though there's some service around during peak times, at 5 o'clock, particularly the end of the week, football games when the traffic gets heavy, just so many times. And as you know, cell phone coverage has gained more and more traction. Most people under 30 don't have a landline. Phones now are used for everything from connecting to your burglar alarm to all sorts of things, opening your garage door and people checking on kids. I think C Spire, some statistics has the largest percentage of smartphone users. So there's just more and more need for this wireless coverage, which is why we're seeking this. And one more thing I'd like to mention, if I could, is that in this C2 zone, what we're asking for, we feel, is a kind of small compared to some other things that are allowed in a C2 zone. Just looking at the new use chart that was Mr. Milo mentioned, passed in January. Vehicular sales and service are allowed in C2, wholesale services, convention centers, and we just feel this tower would be a lot less, I guess you might say, intrusive into the area than any of those possible uses. So we'd just like that to be considered into our hardship for the variance. And I think I talked to Mr. Carver early on before the meeting, and we discussed the safety of the tower. And these towers are designed to a very high standard. They're designed individually. They're not off the shelf. We don't just order a standard tower, you know, they're designed for this location with a foundation about 20 feet under the ground and real sophisticated grounding systems in them. They have structural reports done, you know, before it's built and if it's altered in any way. And also at the prior hearings, there was mention made of the fencing and landscaping, and we agreed to, you know, put a wood fence and if it were approved, and landscape the area around it to suit the city. So anyway, be glad to answer any questions or turn it over to Bob. Did you need to add anything? Oh, okay. He's the engineer available for questions, so.
Mr. White, did you have something
I just
additional?
had one other thing I wanted to add. It's in the packet. We have a letter from the manufacturer of the tower that talks about the design of these, and that it's designed to collapse on itself within 50 feet in the highly unlikely event of a loss of the structure. During Katrina, C-Spire didn't lose any towers, so just from a safety standpoint, that's in your packet.
Ben, do you have anything else before we get started with questions? Okay. Let me remind, as we do get started with questions, that there are two issues before us tonight, and we need to, as they've mentioned in their comments, and we need to address them in order. So first round of questions, let's limit to the question of the adjustments and appeal decision that we have before us, and depending on that, we'll move forward into the other issue. Mr. Parker?
Ben, was there any citizen comment or any people from Abernathy or John Calvin or anybody from that adjacent neighborhood that came to any of the meetings?
No, not for either the variance hearing or for the planning and zoning hearing for either one. And I checked with Ms. Daniel very often, regularly, if anyone had come up the last minute prior to the meeting or the day of the meeting, and surprisingly, we didn't even receive any calls, just inquiry, so absolutely none.
Were there, and where did the direction to work and find another site, that come from P&Z?
The Planning and Zoning Commission, because of the opposition that was raised at the first hearing back in December, Planning and Zoning Commission tabled that first application, and they suggested that the applicants work with the adjacent property owner, because I believe RMR owns a lot of property in the area, and maybe perhaps they can find something suitable, and it's taken them up to this point to get to a point that's suitable for their needs.
Any other questions, Mr. Carver?
Mr. Perkins.
Mr. Perkins?
Thank you, Honorable Vice Mayor. Mr. Griffith, could you come to the table and ask you a couple of questions, please? Mr. Griffith, let me just clear up one thing here about this planning and zoning. I heard the gentleman, the attorney from Brunini, talk about that the city recommended. Let's get the record straight. The Planning and Zoning Commission is just only advisory. It doesn't make decisions for the city. Is that
Yes,
correct?
Yes, sir. That was Planning and Zoning Commission. Yes, sir.
Right. Now, the ordinance has been followed at this point by the Board of Adjustments and Appeals. You know, we have I think the 2,600 and so many feet from a residential area. I mean, that's the ordinance. That's the law, right?
Yes, sir.
And I recall some comments. I believe the vote was 3-1 from the Board of Adjustments and Appeals, and I think we have a former engineer on that, from city engineer on that panel. I think the question came up that, you know, do we set ourselves up? And of course, I didn't attend the meeting, but I kept up with it. Just in reading the comments, the question came up: are we set ourselves up if we, you know, deviate, you know, from the letter of the ordinance? And I agree with that, because what happens is, you know, if you create an exception to the ordinance, then what happens is, you know, then if someone else comes along, if you have another company, then they're going to want similar treatment. So how long has this ordinance, it's been on the books for a number of years, hasn't it?
Yes, sir, it has.
Right. And So even though we didn't have any objection from any of the homeowners, and I think it was about 7 homeowners that was notified, I believe, thereabout. You don't have to
I
look
would
at
have
it.
to look. I
Yeah,
have
yeah.
the file. I don't
understand.
recall exactly how many, but that's probably correct.
I understand, even though if Mr. Planner, that if there were no objections from any homeowners, you know, that still doesn't overlook what the city's ordinance is. In that ordinance, you know, and the petitioner here is seeking to have that, that tower, you know, closer than the 2,600 plus feet than what's required by the ordinance. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Vice Mayor.
Other questions, Mr. Carver?
Personally, being in my ward, I was worried more than anything about the safety of my constituents, and I think I was sold tonight when this group of individuals told me that, for the public record, they said in both Katrina and the F4 tornado, and recently in Tuscaloosa last April, that they're both, in both instances, these towers survived, and in some cases, I know Katrina, maybe not in working condition, but were the only structures that survived. So that kind of sold me on a safety issue, and if they do, if it's something worse than the tornado we saw in Tuscaloosa, they're designed to collapse. And reading through the packet, I was, by engineering standards and guidelines, convinced of that. I think this ordinance has obvious flaws in it. We've got constituents coming tonight. I appreciate Mr. Burnham coming and highlighting some of these things, that we do have flaws in this ordinance, and we amend ordinances all the time. We amend, this board has the power to do that. This is one that needs to be amended, but for tonight's issue, I'm going to be in support of the tower, anything I can do to support the construction of the tower, because I think if you look at the demographics of those people in that area, and I'm pretty familiar, we walked every house, that tends to be the younger college student, young married couples like myself. I don't have a landline. Most of those people that call me, they're calling off a cell phone number. There are coverage issues. I guess these are microwave towers that you got to be able to see the next tower, and I'm probably saying that wrong, but there's a coverage gap in there, and especially if you get lots of people in that area, especially for game day weekends, you can go through and see the population of that area around there west of Green Oaks, west of Stark Road probably doubles in those apartment complexes. And for a safety reason, I also want to make sure that all of my constituents in that area, Ward 1, do have proper coverage and adequate coverage. So that's where I'm going to be. I'm going to be in support of the tower, anything I can do to help get it constructed. So, thank you.
Are there further questions from the board? If not, is there anyone who would like to speak at this time? No? Any comments from the boards, or, as the mayor likes to point out, we have no action item before us?
Let's be real clear, Vice Mayor. May I be recognized first?
Certainly.
Does anybody want to be heard on this issue, either for or against the location of the cell phone tower? Okay, thank you.
There's an action item from the board?
There's 2 issues to address. You said
There are
the
two.
first.
The first is the appeals and adjustment and appeals decision, and then we go to the P&Z issue.
May I be recognized again? Since this is a consideration of a recommendation from the Board of Adjustment and Appeals, the criteria for this decision is different than a zoning change or from a conditional use zoning request. The criteria that applies to this is listed in Mr. Griffith's packet, starting on page 2. And they're the numbers 1 through 6. And so factor in the facts and explanations that you've heard into those specific criteria as the basis for your opinion, because those are the criteria for the variance. If you, at the end of the day, choose to grant the variance, then you need to make a finding of fact. And the finding of fact is pursuant to Section 2, 176.5 of our ordinance. That factual finding is listed on page 4 of the actual written appeal in paragraph 13. And before the vote, I'd be happy to read those factual findings to make sure they're on the front of everybody's brain before the vote occurs. Or I could do that right now at the board's discretion, whatever you desire.
I would just ask you to do that right now.
Okay. And I'll voice these the way they're voiced in the ordinance as a whether or not, because the decision's unknown. You have to decide first whether or not the requirements of the land development regulations have been met by the applicant for a variance. Number 2, whether or not reasons set forth in the application justify the granting of the variance. Number 3, whether or not the variance is the minimum variance that will make possible the reasonable use of land, building, or structure. And 4th, whether or not the granting of the variance will be in harmony with the general purpose and intent of the land development regulations. And 5th, whether or not the variance would be injurious to the neighborhood or otherwise detrimental to the public welfare. Those findings of fact track generally the conditions that are listed or the criteria listed in Mr. Griffith's staff report.
City Attorney, can I have the floor?
Yes, sir.
I think you know where I want to go. I do want to make a motion to support the construction of this. So is there any way you could draft up something that meets all those obligations you just stated?
Sure. If you were to do that, you would make a motion to approve the variance and to override the recommendation of the Board of Adjustment and Appeals with findings of fact in the affirmative consistent with Section 2, 176.5.
Say move.
We have a motion by Alderman Carver to approve the 2 variances requested by the applicant based on finding of facts and conclusions of the staff report.
And Section 2, 176.5 of Starkville's Code of Ordinances.
Said very nicely. I'll read it.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, let's take a roll call vote if you would. Sure. That might be the easiest way to do it. Alderman Carver,
Yay?
Alderman Parker,
Yay.
Alderman Corey,
Nay.
Alderman Dumas,
Nay.
Alderman Perkins,
Nay.
Alderman Vaughn,
Nay.
a vote of 4 to 2, this measure fails. Do we need to?
City Attorney, do I have to have that first one to proceed to the second?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Because the reason is the Planning and Zoning Commission made the variance a condition of their recommended approval.
Okay.
Adjustment appeals.
No, because this, you do have to adopt it. It's final action from the board, so we need a motion.
So we do need a motion, to adopt the recommendation of the Board of Adjustments and Appeals.
So moved.
Alderman Corey has moved, I'm sorry, I've lost my screen here. Alderman Corey has moved. Can you help me with the verbiage while I'm
Sure.
trying to get adoption?
To adopt the recommendation of the Board of Adjustment and Appeals denying the 2 variances requested.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Alderman Perkins. This time we'll do a show of hands. All in favor of Alderman Corey's motion, please signify by raising your hand. All opposed? By a vote of 4 to 2, Alderman Corey's measure passes. That makes the second item moot, since it was contingent upon that item. We will retrieve the mayor, turn things back over to him.
You need to go get him so we can.
I can't.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you for your attention.
I did that on the fly.
It's just.
You can use yourself.
Is our ordinance required? See, it's just
That I have prompted yet not.
We have settled it.
And need to devise a plan of getting
Are y'all in recess or y'all staying?
No, we didn't recess.
All right, well, good to be back. The next matter on the agenda is the consideration of hiring a new director for sanitation and environmental services. Alderman Perkins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I move approval of appointing Emma Gandy as the new Sanitation Environmental Services Director for the city of Starkville, Mississippi, effective September 1, 2012, at a grade 16, step 1 with the applicable probationary period.
Motion from Alderman Perkins is to approve the hiring of Emma Gandy as the new Director of Sanitation and Environmental Services at a grade 16, step 1, to begin on September 1st, 2012, with the applicable probationary period. Alderman Perkins, is that your motion?
Yes, sir.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by Alderman Vaughn. Alderman Perkins, do you speak on the merits?
No, sir.
Any discussion? Alderman Carver.
Only thing I remember on this particular applicant, we had spoke about the educational or the, you had a couple questions for her in the interview, Alderman Perkins, about did she meet all the educational or the experience requirements?
Yes, sir. I looked at all of the finalists very closely. She meets all the qualifications. The one that I really alluded to my questions was the 3 to 5 years of administrative experience in sanitary management, and based upon her application and the attachment, she meets those qualifications. Yes, sir.
Further discussion? Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of Alderman Perkins?
Time out. Can I know what can you reread the motion, please?
Yes, motion is to hire Emma Gandy at grade 16, step 1, as Director of Sanitation and Environmental Services to begin September 1st, 2012. And since you were coming back in as I was calling,
I'm sorry.
do you have anything you'd like to say at this point?
Well, I would briefly like to say that I felt like that we did have two applicants that seemed to be clear, had one internal and Ms. Emma that I feel like deserved a very, very serious look and an opportunity to do that job. Also felt like we had another one, Mr. Jim McReynolds, that in my opinion had the truer actual sanitation experience, being in that industry for a long time. Whichever one the board hires here tonight, I intend to fully support and help in any way that I can. But I felt like we did have two clear applicants that came out from the interview process, and I was happy to see those two applicants and consider both.
Further discussion? Any 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 further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of Alderman Perkins' motion, please signify by raising your hand. All those opposed, please signify by raising your hand. By a vote of 6 in favor with 1 against, this measure passes. And that will carry us all the way to discussion and consideration of changes in the personnel policy. And as Randy makes his way forward, I'll offer a brief introduction on this because this one really comes at my suggestion. I had a request from an employee that compelled me to ask to look at the policy, and I think the policy should be changed. Simply, we have an employee that has not been with the city fully for a year now, has a very serious medical condition that has required her to be on leave for approximately a month. She indicated that she believes there are people that would be willing to donate leave pursuant to our leave donation policy. However, our leave donation policy does not permit somebody that's only been on the job for less than a year to take advantage of that. I think in this case that the policy would produce a rather cold result, as this person would not have the option of exercising it. And frankly, any case where somebody meets the threshold of having a serious injury and having people that are willing to come forward and donate leave time, I think the result would be cold in those cases as well. So the revision to this policy is simply taking that exception out of the policy. So if you have people that are willing to donate leave time for your serious illness, you could exercise that under the policy.
Move approval.
Motion has been made by Alderman Dumas to approve of the proposed changes to the personnel leave policy on donation of leave time as presented. Alderman Dumas, is that your motion?
Yes.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by Alderman Corey. Alderman Dumas, will speak on the merits. Any discussion? Alderman Carver.
I just got a question. Is this person still in the probationary period, or is?
Yeah, they're within a year.
I mean, is it 90-day probationary, or is it 1 year?
No. You have a 1 year probationary period with 90-day periodic reviews.
Okay. Thank you.
Further discussion? Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Measure clearly passes. And that exhausts the open session portion of our agenda. Okay. At this time, a motion to go into closed session would be in order.
Mayor, I move we go to closed session to discuss the need for an executive session.
Alderman Corey's made a motion to go into a closed session to determine whether there is a need for an executive session. Alderman Corey, is that your motion?
It is.
Do I hear a second? Motion has been seconded by Alderman Parker. Alderman Corey, do you wish to speak on the merits?
I do not.
Any discussion? Any discussion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Measure clearly passes. At this time, we'll ask that the public clear the room so we can go into closed session to determine whether there's a need for an executive session.